let's start. Um, in the last class, we discussed about probability theory, different kinds of random variables. We saw discrete random variables, then continuous random variables. So whatever we are discussing, this is a good reference. PRML Bishop book, section 1.2. The basic idea which we discussed is, so we have got the basic idea is we get samples first. Right? We get some samples. From samples, we approximate a distribution or a model from where the samples are being generated. The simplest way is to construct a histogram. Let us say this is my x-axis and different samples on x-axis, basically, which are just so from here I can construct a histogram. Which may look like this. Like that. But histogram is one way of representing our data. It has its limitations. Means the kind of smoothing which it can do is very local, but we can have better ways of estimating or modeling the data. So basically the concept is, so we start from samples, then we go to a model. I could use a smoother estimate of the data, a smoother model, maybe something like this, right? And then my final goal is to do something with this, to ask questions about data. For example, I may ask question, what is the probability, or how likely is something, right? How likely is, we saw the example, if people are doing assignments, they are taking this much of time, how much time I will take, how much time I might take. So that is the belief on, to get some belief on some random variable, right? So I can call it as inference. Some kind of inference, some kind of, some question which I want to ask to this model. We'll see more examples. We saw some examples in the last class, but we'll be seeing more examples later. So, but the important thing to understand is, I have got samples, and I construct a model, I build a model to explain my samples, and then I ask questions to my model that, okay, what if this happens, or what if, what is the probability of getting samples in this region, for example? Like, I can ask different questions. So now we discussed in the last class about different kinds of probability distribution functions, probability density functions. Now today we are going to look into some standard probability density functions. So the goal is this. The goal is, given these samples, I want to estimate a model, build a model with which I can do something useful. So to build this model, I will look into different standard PDFs which are available to me. One such PDF which is very popular is Gaussian distribution. So what is Gaussian distribution? How does it look like? The shape is more important than the mathematical form in the beginning to get an intuitive understanding. So intuitively it is something like this. So my x from where I'm getting samples. So it says that there is a particular mu, a particular region where I get more samples than anywhere else, right? Uh, if I want to, so for example, I ask, um, if I ask this question, what is the let's say the voltage in the main supply. What is the voltage? If I measure, the value will be, you know, it is close to 230 volts, but it might be 231, 232, or 229, something like that. But it will be around 230, right? So I can model it with this kind of distribution. I can say, okay, it is close to 230, but it could be a little bit plus or minus. So this is an intuitive understanding of Gaussian distribution, that mu is the value where mostly, which is mostly observed, but you will also observe some deviation from mu. And the farther you go from mu, the less likely it is to be observed, right? And the mathematical form is something like this. The important thing to notice here is this term. So exponential of x minus mu whole square. So basically, this is the basic form, which is important. And this is just a normalization constant, basically, so that it sums up to 1. If you integrate it over x, the integration should be 1. So this is the form of normal distribution. Now I may ask the question, what is the expected value of x, which means the mean, right? We saw in the last class. This is the mean. So if I observe many x, what will be the average value which I will be observing? So to find the average value, I will take the expected value of x, and I will say x into PDF of x, which is a normal distribution, this thing, into dx, integrated over the entire number line. So keep in mind, this x here is not a sample, but it is the x's or the number line, right? That's why I'm multiplying with the PDF. If these were just the samples, I would just take the sample mean, sum of all the samples and divide by the number of samples, right? We discussed this in the last class. So in this case, x is just the number line. That's why I multiply with the probability density function. So you can do this integration on your own. It is very simple. So basically, it is just x times e to the power minus x minus mu whole square upon 2 sigma square into dx, integrated from minus infinity to plus infinity. And also there is this 2 pi sigma square under root. This term is there. So this thing is equal to this, right? And you know how to integrate it. This is a simple integration, right?
I didn't get why you brought up the last class thing. Like, it was like samples you were taking, but over here this is continuous distribution.
I'm just reminding you the fact that here the x is the x-axis or the axis. It's not; these are not samples, right? If these were samples, then expected value of x would have been just sum over all the samples divided by the number of all the samples. But in this case, it is proper integration. So this thing is easy to integrate. How will you integrate it? You can say, let us substitute x minus mu whole square to be some variable lambda, right? And with this, you can very easily get the mean of the value of this integration, of this integral, right? Similarly, the next term also, integration over x square times this thing, right? Oh, actually, you can also do it by parts, integration by parts. How many of you know integration by parts? Oh, everybody. Integration by parts also can be done here, because you know that the integration of e to the power minus x minus mu whole square upon 2 sigma square dx 1 upon 2 pi sigma square integral this minus 2 plus something. This is equal to 1, right? This you already know. So you can use this to find out the integral of that thing. Okay. Now, uh, okay, this is the Gaussian distribution. Now, how to use it? Now I have got some samples. I have samples of a random variable. I want to model it with Gaussian distribution. How do I estimate the model parameters? What are model parameters? Mu and sigma square, right? They are my model parameters, which means that I can change these values and I will get different distributions. So mu and sigma are my model parameters. Now the question is, given the samples, how do I estimate the model parameters? Let us say my random variable is t. I want to maximize the, okay. So one way to estimate the parameters is to maximize the probability of observed samples, right? I want to maximize that, the probability that these are the samples which I'm observing and they have the maximum probability of being sampled, right? So this is called, okay, so this is called maximum likelihood estimate, which means I want to maximize the likelihood of the samples which I have observed, right? Mathematically, it is like this. My parameters are equal to argmax over these parameters of probability of the samples given mu comma sigma maximized over mu and sigma. Is this clear? So this is very basic. I'm sure you must have read this before. This is called maximum likelihood estimate. So the basic philosophy is, I have got a model. I want to maximize the probability of observing the samples which I have observed by varying the model parameters. And what values of model parameters give me that maximum probability? Those values of mu and sigma, or the parameters, are my MLE estimates, my desired estimates. This is called maximum likelihood estimation. Okay, let us do this MLE for the parameters of a Gaussian PDF. So you have a Gaussian PDF which is something like this. Probability of, okay, one thing which we missed. Okay, we are assuming that all these samples are generated independently, right? So if they are independent, then I can break up this joint distribution into individual Gaussian distributions, right? If my T1, T2, Tn are all independent, then I can write Pt1 into Pt2 into so on up to Ptn, right? This is because of the independence property. Okay, now next is, okay, this is just the independence thing. I have converted the joint distribution into the product of individual densities. Now these are in the product form. Products are difficult to handle, so make it sum. How do you make it sum? By taking the log. Log of the joint distribution is equal to log of individual distributions and summed over all these individual things. And I know the value of probability of Ti given mu comma sigma. I assume it as Gaussian, so then it becomes this thing, right? Maybe I'll just write it down so that you remember. Probability of Ti given mu comma sigma square. This is equal to 1 upon 2 pi sigma square under root exponential of minus Ti minus mu whole square divided by 2 sigma square. If you take the log of the whole thing, it becomes this thing. So the numerator, log and exponential are cancelled. So 1 upon 2 sigma square into summation. Why summation? Because there was a summation here. Ti minus mu, the same thing, whole square. And this term it corresponds to this term. Minus n by 2 log of 2 pi sigma square. Okay. Okay. So probability of the probability of all these samples sampled at S1, S2, so on up to Sn, this is called the likelihood of observing those samples. And if I take the log, this is called log likelihood. And I want to maximize the log likelihood with respect to mu and sigma. That is called the maximum likelihood estimate of mu and sigma. Okay. So first, maximum likelihood estimate of mu. I have the likelihood, this is the same thing, I've just copied from there. Now you want to estimate mu hat. Now my mu hat is argmax over mu log likelihood, right? And I write down the log likelihood, and in these things, which one is a function of mu? Only this term is a function of mu. If I differentiate it with respect to mu and put it equal to 0, that will give me the value of mu, and that will be the value where this thing is maximum or minimum. So okay, let us take the derivative and make it equal to 0. So the derivative of this thing will be equal to minus 1 upon 2 sigma square times this thing s minus mu times twice of the derivative of mu, which is minus 1. For this term, derivative is equal to 0. So I put this derivative equal to 0, and from here I obtain summation over si minus summation over I mu. They are equal. So from here so summation over I mu is constant, it can come out, and summation over I1, which is equal to capital N just. So mu is 1 upon capital N summation over all samples. This is my maximum likelihood estimate of the mu. Similarly, I can find the maximum likelihood estimate of sigma square. What I have to do is, okay, the likelihood, same thing. Now here an important trick is involved. I might be tempted to do right? So this is not what I intend to do, because this will give me a maximum likelihood estimate of sigma, but I want maximum likelihood estimate of sigma square, and there might be difference in their estimation, because we discussed in the few lectures ago that any random variable, if you transform it, the underlying PDF changes, right? Transformation of variables changes the PDF. So that is why when I want to estimate sigma square, I won't be estimating sigma and then taking a square. I will be estimating sigma square only. So that's why this thing is not correct. I have to do derivative with respect to sigma square only. So that's why I have assumed sigma square equal to a, substituted with another random variable a, and derivative with respect to a, log likelihood, this is equal to the same thing, just replace sigma square with a. So this will be an a, and this will be an a. So simply the derivative, put it equal to 0, and you get the estimate. This is the maximum likelihood estimate of sigma square, which is simply si minus mu ml, mu hat ml whole square divided by n. Right? Any questions until now? Okay, many times it might happen that I have some prior belief on parameters. Let us say I want to say my parameters lie in this range. So I have an initial prior belief. I can give you an example. For example, when you were doing curve fitting, basically you were trying to estimate W's, right, for the linear regression model. Then you had a prior belief that you applied a regularizer term, norm of W square, right? You assumed that my W should be very small, close to 0. Equivalently, you could say my prior belief is that W is 0, and from there I want to estimate my actual W. My prior belief is that it is 0 means okay, it is very close to 0 with some with some deviation, some variance, right? So my W is 0, but with some variance, let us say some sigma, let us say 1. And then I want to estimate my values of W given the new data which has come in. So probability of W is a normal distribution W given 0, 1, means mu is 0, standard deviation is 1. And now I want to estimate PW given the samples S1, S2, right? I want to estimate my W with my prior belief is that okay, it is 0 with some standard deviation, but now with the samples, what is my new estimate? This could be an example of MAP, maximum a posteriori estimate, which means I have some prior belief which I want to incorporate while estimating the value of the unknown parameters given the data points, given the samples. Right? So the basic formulation looks like this. Any parameter which I want to estimate theta or mu sigma is equal to argmax. You are maximizing over these parameters. Maximizing what? The log likelihood. But this time it is not log likelihood. This is the probability of the parameters given the data, given the samples. Right? But you can use Bayes rule to decompose or to rewrite probability of parameters given the samples is equal to probability of samples given the parameters into probability of parameters divided by probability of the samples, right? And the denominator is independent of the parameters, so you can ignore it. Only the numerator is a function of parameters, so you are maximizing the numerator with respect to the parameters. So there is a term called P of mu comma sigma, which you have to assume, right? It is in your hand. You can tune it. For example, you may say, I think the mean should be something close to 1 and the variance should be something close to 2, right? So you can incorporate that into your model, into this equation, and given the new samples, you can estimate your new values of mu and sigma. Okay, so let us do an example with the help of Gaussian distribution. So I want to estimate the mean of the Gaussian distribution, but now in a map way, in a maximum a posteriori estimate method. So assume a Gaussian prior. I assume that my initial mu is mu naught. My initial means my mu, my underlying parameter of the Gaussian distribution. This itself is the prior itself is Gaussian distributed with a mean mu naught and variance sigma naught square. Now I can write down, so the term here, which is log probability of mu given data, I can write it like this in Gaussian. Should I write it maybe? So it is probability of, okay, write it like this. Probability of mu given the samples S1 to Sn, right? This is equal to probability of the samples, which I can use my independence property to write it like this: probability of samples given mu into probability of mu, which is my prior belief. This is equal to 1 upon 2 pi sigma square under root e to the power minus si minus mu whole square upon 2 sigma square. This thing basically product over all the I, right, into my prior, which is 2 pi. Now this is sigma naught square e to the power minus mu naught whole square upon 2 sigma naught square. Is this clear? Any questions until now? Pardon? Denominator? Okay, so because we want to find I want to do argmax with respect to mu, my denominator is not a function of mu, so I have simply ignored it. It's a constant with respect to mu, right? My denominator, which is probability of S1 comma so on to Sn, that is a constant with respect to mu, right? It's not a function of mu. So that is why I have ignored it. It appears somewhere, okay, maybe 1 upon z, where z is a constant, which won't play any role in estimation of maximum, right? Good question. Okay, now if I take a log of this term, it will become this. So 1 upon 2 sigma square, summation over Si minus mu whole square, right? So this term becomes the first term here, right? Sorry. So this is my first term, then this is my second term, right? And then mu minus mu naught, this thing is my third term, which is this one. And the fourth term is this one. Is this clear? Okay. Now I want to differentiate it with respect to mu, and I want to find its maximum value. Basically, I make it equal to 0 and find the value of mu. So, pardon? Okay, so I am estimating just mu. I am not estimating sigma square. So this is the map estimate of mu. Yeah. So now, like taking the derivative and doing some simplification, it gives me this term, which is basically I can rearrange it to separate all the mu terms, and I can easily get the estimate of mu. This is summation of Si divided by sigma square plus mu naught upon sigma naught square divided by the whole thing, right? So this is my map estimate, maximum a posteriori estimate of mu. Anybody has any questions until now? Please. Pardon? Yes. It is dependent on sigma square. Yeah, good question. So, like we saw in the previous case, my ML estimate of sigma square was dependent on the on the estimate of mu, which we did not know. So I substituted the mu as the estimate of ML estimate of mu, right? But in this case, my estimate of mu itself depends on sigma square, which I might not know a priori. So how do I go about that? So yeah, it's a good question. So here again you have to find an estimate of sigma square and substitute it here to get, you can substitute it with ML estimate of sigma square, or you can estimate it with some other estimate of sigma square. Good question. What if that estimate is also dependent on mu? Pardon? Yeah, then we have to resort to iterative approaches where we update both in tandem. Like we both are updated sequentially. You update mu, then update sigma, update mu, update sigma. So many times when in our optimization, it is not possible to estimate multiple parameters all at once. So we take help of iterative approaches where we estimate one parameter and then keeping that as constant, estimate the next parameter, and then take it as constant and estimate the next parameter, right? So that is how it can be done. Okay, summarizing. So my ML estimate, so given probability of the random variable from where I am sampling, I assume that there is a model, right? Let us say how we start. In the beginning, I have samples, right? I have samples. Then you make a random variable which from where we are sampling, right? From where these samples are taken, right? Then you make a model or assume a model like in this case it is p of x given theta with parameters theta. Theta are your model parameters. Now you want to estimate the model parameters. Estimate So to estimate the model parameters, we saw two approaches. One is the ML estimate, where you are maximizing the probability of observing the samples given the model parameters, right? Then we saw map estimate, where you are maximizing the probability of the model parameters themselves given the samples or given the data, which is equivalent to maximizing probability of data given the parameters into probability of parameters. And this probability of parameters, this is our prior on those parameters, right? Now a question for you. When are ML and map estimates same? Let me ask somebody.
When x is independent of theta.
X is independent of theta. If x is independent of theta, which means that your model does not explain anything. Rahul. When are ML and map estimates the same? Okay, let me try to do it graphically. This might help you to answer this question. So what is happening in this case? You have P of x given theta, right? Let us say this is my, let's say the Gaussian distribution, x, right? And this is my P of x given theta. Right? And what is the meaning of ML? Not like this, sorry. I'm sorry. See, my x is fixed already. My theta is a variable. So I cannot write x here. X is fixed. This is my observed samples, S, right? So this is my theta. So this my x is fixed. These are the samples. So they are fixed. So by varying my theta, I am varying the probability of observing those samples, right? But those samples are already fixed. So by varying my theta, I am just varying this. So what is my theta ML? So wherever this probability is maximum, this is my theta ML. Clear? Now what is happening in map? In map, so I have some this is my probability of x given theta, right? But I also have some initial prior, maybe something like this, which is probability of theta, right? And I multiply the two. If I multiply the two, what will I get? Whatever is their product, maybe something like this. Right, this is my probability of probability of theta given x, right? And this is my theta. Now what is my theta map? So wherever is the maximum of this probability, right? This is my theta map. Note that this is smaller than theta ml because my p theta will try to pull this curve towards origin, right? My p theta is trying to pull the curve towards origin. That is why my theta map is smaller than theta ml in this case. So where is my theta ml in this case? So this is my theta ml, right? Right? So now the question is, when will theta map and theta map be same? Huh? Just tell from the graph. Huh? Yes, one very good answer is when both have same distribution. If my p x given theta and p, when my p theta also looks the same as p x given theta, then they will give the same maximum, right, after multiplication. Right? Yeah, that is a good answer, but it is very unlikely, right, that your p theta, you assume it to be exactly same what your p x given theta is. It is so difficult to design such a p theta. Any other intuition? So what p theta is doing? It is trying to pull p x given theta in certain direction, or it is trying to modify it. When you multiply the two, when will they not affect? When will p theta not affect p x given theta when you are multiplying? When will that happen? If expected values are same, that is what he also suggested, that when both have the maximum at the same point, then, but it is difficult to design such a p theta, right? That its maximum value should exactly be same as p theta, p x given theta. That is a difficult thing. When 10 people are pulling you in one direction, you get pulled towards that. But if they are all pulling you equally in all directions, then you will not be moved, right? So what is that case? If you shift p theta to exactly at px given theta, then it is a difficult thing to do, and it won't. Then you are in a way your p theta will be dependent on x, right? You are implicitly making it dependent on x. Yes, when it is uniformly distributed. When p theta is a flat curve, when you multiply every term with the same number, means when you multiply every term of px given theta with the same number, then its nature won't change, right? So when your p theta is a uniform distribution, okay, then they will be same. This is your p theta. When it is a uniform distribution, then it won't be able to pull in a particular direction, right? If you speak a little bit louder, I'll. You're suggesting that if my p theta is very sharply peaked about 1, then if you multiply p theta with px given theta, it will be not changed. It will be approximately the same as p theta.
If you want it, it's the same case.
You have to shift that one.
Yeah, you will have to shift that one such that the maximum comes at the same point. So it will be dependent on that.
So if you multiply this with p theta, px given theta, then your curve will change drastically, no? Means it will become something like this. If let us say my p theta given px given theta was something like this, then the product will look something like this. You will have, right? Isn't it? The product will look something like this. Of course, you normalize it, but it won't help, right? There's a difference between the values of x and the values of p. You're saying that when you sample from this distribution, you will be sampling 1 most of the times, but you're not multiplying those ones with px given theta. You are multiplying p theta with px given theta, right? So your p theta has to be uniform or same value. Okay.
There is a chance that our MLE lies outside the range of trial. Because there is a chance that MLE will be negative in the trial.
Yes, good. Yes, good. Good observation. So the observation is that my theta ml will have some value, and my uniform distribution. So the question is, how big the range should I take for my uniform distribution? If I take it very small, let's say uniform between 0 and 1, then again it is biased towards 0 and 1, right? We'll pull all the distribution to 0 and 1. That's not what we want to achieve. We want to have the base or the domain of my x to be very large. Maybe I should show it with an example. So let us say this is my px given theta, right? And if my p theta is just uniform 0, 1, is this what will make map estimate same as MLE estimate? No, it won't do it. So we have to take a very large value, a very large domain of p theta. So let us say if I take a very large domain, but how large that domain should be, right? Still it will affect, right? So how large that range should be? Yeah, actually it should be infinite, but I do not have, 3 sigma, but you do not know sigma, right? Okay, no, but how far is the mean from the origin? This mu ml. So yeah, if you know mu ml, then you can take your range to be very large. Generally, what is taken? Okay, generally because uniform distribution has got a very sharp cutoff. So generally, what we do is we take probability of theta is equal to a normal distribution, right? Theta with parameters. The mean is equal to, you can take anything, maybe 0 or something, and the sigma is very large. Let me call it sigma theta, where sigma theta is very, very large, right? So it essentially becomes a Gaussian, but very, very flattened too much, so that it is almost like a uniform distribution. right?
That normally in sample, let's say you compare it between zero to one, then there shouldn't be a problem because the mean can't be outside of zero of that sample. Expected value of x.
We are running short of time. Maybe I'll come back to this question. I'm sorry, I just saw the clock. Okay, shouldn't, okay. Now my mu hat means the estimate of mu. Until now we have considered single values of these parameters. Like I assumed, okay, my mu is a single value, which is map estimate, single value, which is MLE estimate. But these can also be considered to be random variables, right? What if I consider them to be random variables? So that is called the Bayesian approach. So in the Bayesian approach, the model parameters are also random variables, right? My model, Gaussian model, the parameters mu and sigma square, they are also considered to be random variables, not just a single point, which is the best optimal point will satisfy all your points, but it is also a random variable, and we estimate their PDFs. We do not estimate their single values, but we estimate their PDFs. Okay, so let us carry out this exercise, which is Bayesian estimation of mu. Now my probability of mu given the data samples, I can use, this is same as map estimate, what we just now studied. I can say my p mu given the data samples is equal to p data samples given the mu into p mu divided by t. I know the denominator does not play any role because it is independent of mu. So I consider just the numerator. The numerator is this. Pt given mu, the data samples given the mu, which is just a normal distribution like this, because they are independent, so the product over all the pi's, and multiplied with the prior, which is, I assume here that my prior is, my p mu is normal mu given mu naught comma sigma naught square, right? And this is the distribution which comes out. Okay, now I have to estimate. Now this is equal to, I just expand it, all the constant terms I take it to the left, and all the exponentials I have merged here. Now if you examine this is ti minus mu whole square, summation over all the i's, minus mu naught whole square. If you see this term, this is again a quadratic in mu, right? This term is again a quadratic in mu, which means this distribution is again a Gaussian distribution. And since this is a Gaussian distribution, this makes my life easier to estimate the parameters. Now I want to estimate what is the mean of this Gaussian distribution and what is the sigma square of this Gaussian distribution. I don't have to do anything, just I will compare it with the standard Gaussian distribution, right? By just comparing this form with the standard Gaussian distribution, I can find its mu dash, which is the mean of this distribution, and sigma dash, which is the standard deviation of this distribution. Now there are some steps involved here, I will just explain. Completing the squares to match with, so this is my basic form which I want to compare with, mu minus mu dash whole square upon 2 sigma dash whole square, right? And if I expand it, it becomes mu square upon this plus mu dash square minus 2 mu dash divided by this, right? Now I go back to my previous term, which was this one, this the term in the exponential, and I expand it. I open all the squares, and so that I can get mu square terms and mu terms and the constant terms. So if I look at all my mu square terms now, which are this and this, I put them all together, n upon sigma square, and this term 1 upon sigma naught square. Similarly, I put together all my terms with mu. The coefficients are these, and the terms which are independent of mu, they are these ones. Now I consider this term, right? I compare it with this term, which is, so mu square upon 2 times sigma dash whole square. So to find the value of sigma dash square, I can simply compare it with this coefficient. So 1 upon sigma dash square is equal to n upon sigma square plus. So basically just comparing the coefficients of mu square, right? So I'm just comparing my form with the standard form by comparing the coefficients. Coefficients of mu square, so it gives me sigma dash square. Similarly, when I compare the coefficients of mu, it will give me the, so this one. This will give me the, right? So this will give me the values of u dash. So maybe you can go through this. This is very simple, just rearrangement. But this is a very important step. In Gaussians, completing the squares is a very important operation, because you can just by completing the squares and putting the Gaussian in some standard form, you can infer so much about its parameters, right? Okay, I think we can stop here. Thank you.